Hey everybody, welcome to another Knife 911. Today we're going to talk about the Benchmade Contigo. So, right here we have it, the 810 Contigo. 911 on this guy is roughness. Everywhere you touch, save the clip and the blade, is aggressively roughly textured. Lots of jimping, and said jimping is, you guessed it, rough. Hard use folder from Benchmade, CPM M4 blade, tells me they're serious. Quick stats. Overall length is 9.28 inches, 235.7 millimeters, 5.3 inches or 134 millimeters closed. Blade is 3.98 inches or 101 millimeters. Stock is 160 thousandths or 4 millimeters, 55 hundredths of an inch or 14 millimeters thick. It's got a reverse Tonto profile, saber ground with a swedge. CPM M4 Benchmade's running it at 62 to 64 on the Rockwell hardness scale. Weighs 5.92 ounces or 167.8 grams, and it is an axis locking thumb stud knife priced at $200. So that's the 911 on this guy. Now, here's the intake. We have an axis locking Benchmade. Wow. Axis lock is a good system for one-handed operation, reliable locking, but that's where the magic really ends for me. There are two reasons for that. The first is blade centering. Now, this knife has good centering, but many of them don't, and the reason is that the access bar has to be perfectly perpendicular to the rotational axis and perfectly parallel to the locking surface of the blade load, and there must be absolutely no play in the pivot in order to achieve perfect centering. Second is the detent, or lack thereof. There's no sharp, snappy detent like I would get with a lock bar knife. Right about there, maybe about 20-25% out of blade travel. That's where my hump of pressure from the axis lock is overcome. So you don't really have a real detent to speak of. And that's just an axis lock thing. But those are the two reasons why they're not really magical for me. So, going back to this roughness theme right here, every single place on this knife, the jimping here, everywhere on the scales is cut. Here, more right there. You know, if you got big hands and they've got considerable callus on them, like mine do, it's not really an issue. But, you know, if not, then this is probably not the knife for you. Keeping with that hard use theme, this is the second biggest knife that Benchmade makes. And by weight, it's the biggest by blade length, which is kind of surprising now. Right. And there's another thing which doesn't really make a lot of sense, is this reverse Tonto profile. You can see where, you know, there's the reverse Tonto and it's just brought right up there. But I'm sort of scratching my head because this is not a particularly stabby tip, and the reverse Tonto is really aimed at preserving tip strength. So why do you need to preserve tip strength with something that's not really a stabby tip? Anyway. And then there's this swedge right here, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. All it really does is make it difficult to sharpen in a guided system. That's, I mean, yeah. Well, I digress. Anyway. I used a drill press to add this lanyard hole right here, and you know, it did not come like this stock, and I add lanyard holes, and I would not have had there been any other place to attach this lanyard. I don't like putting them on the clip because they can get lost too easily going in and out of the pocket. But had there been any other place, a standoff, a hole in the backspacer, something to allow me to attach, nope, had to drill the hole. So, moving right along, the quality of the Cerakote is really quite good here. You know, it's nice and thick, it's even, no drips, no runs. It's good. It seems to be holding up, you know, pretty well, even though I'm already starting to put marks on it. It's my hard use knife. I'm going to beat the snot out of it. And no apologies for that. So looking at the rest of the build, it has a rather substantial 16th, a little less than 16th of an inch, full-length liners. I expect that on hard-use knives, but I really expect it on most knives. You know, it's an indicator of quality saying that this is going to last, you know, a reasonable amount of time. When I don't get it, like on the Benchmade 940, where the scales are just aluminum and they're really are no full-length liners, that's when I start having quality question marks. But, that said, I polished up all the bearing surfaces, including the inside of the liners, the blade lobe, the washers, everything, to give this thing a smoother action. But when I tune my Benchmades, I don't want them dropping free of their own. I want them to have a little bit of drag on them. It allows me to get a really good tight lockup, right, and have a nice wrist flickable action, but I'm not going to, go around swinging the blade. That's just where I prefer mine. A lot of guys run them looser, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I had one of these as a beater knife for like about the last 6 years before I finally killed it. And when I did finally kill it, almost all the DLC was gone. It was broken in half a dozen places, but it still worked just fine. And it still held an edge really like no other, only needing to be mildly sharpened once every 3 months or so. And that was really very impressive to me. The blade on this thing was really the quality piece. And in my opinion, and this is just my impression from having put new secondary bevels and edges on a lot of knives, Benchmade has a better heat treat on their CPM M4 than Spyderco does. Benchmade's heat treat seems to be harder than Spyderco's, and it seems to be tougher as well, but that could be a function of there just being a lot more steel behind this edge than there is behind the edge on a Spyderco Manix 2, which is my experience with Spyderco CPM M4. Now that knife took a very fine edge, finer than this one, but it never held it the way either of my 810s did, and the 810 is my beater knife, so I'm going to know whether it's going to hold an edge. If you're going into and out of your pocket on a fairly regular basis, be sure not to put items you don't want damaged in the pocket with it. The 810 will definitely put marks on anything else that shares a pocket with it, including other metal objects. It also takes up more pocket real estate than it looks like it should, and that's because of the way this thing is supposed to fit into your hand. If this is the edge that's going to be presented to the pocket, you got some pretty sharp jimping right here, and this corner, which is going to scratch stuff up. But that said, let's go back to this swedge here, which really does not make a whole lot of sense. You normally put a swedge on a knife to take a little bit of weight off. You also might put one on to make the back edge of the blade a little bit more streamlined, but really only more towards the tip. This one has one that leaves this at a full 160 thousandths right out here. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You're not really saving any weight, and all you're doing is making it difficult to sharpen in a guided system. So I'm sort of scratching my head as to that. The other thing is that I don't know if the camera's going to pick this up, but you can see inside here where they've drilled out a whole bunch of the liner material. Why? It's already weighs 6 ounces. It's a hard use folder. Your Adamus weighs 8 ounces. Who cares if it's 7.5, not 6? I'd rather have it be a little cheaper and a little heavier, but that's just me. So, I'm not too concerned with weight. Moving on, a deep carry clip is standard here, and it's a very welcome thing. Whenever I handle and take a really hard look at a knife, I try to discern what portion of the price tag went where. For this knife, it seems as if about 3/4 of its build budget went into the blade and the pivot, and that's absolutely as it should be. Those are the parts of the knife which are really going to have to absorb the most abuse and hold up, so I appreciate the budget going there. The other quarter seems to have been spent on milling and texturing the G10, really to the exclusion of almost everything else. You can see how there's sort of a basket weave pattern up top here, and there's these nice scallops which are almost sharp at their edges. It doesn't bother me any, but if you have very soft hands, because you just don't do anything that would require your hands to get hard, then it's probably not going to work too well for you. But almost everything else here, save the glass breaker and backspacer, seems like a complete afterthought, such that they didn't even bother to add a lanyard hole. Well, dispatch on this, guys. The 810 Contigo is one of the best, if not the best, current offering in Benchmade's catalog. It's a no-frills, high-quality, hard-use folder. Its combination of top-notch blade steel, solid build quality, and aggressive nature lends itself well to its most common role. And if you beat the snot out of your knife and this is the Benchmade for you. The 275 Adamus is a good knife, but in my experience, the 810 Contigo is tougher, holds an edge longer, and it's a better value than a similarly priced 275 Adamus. All right, everybody, that was tonight's Knife 911 signing off.